Now, I didn't think I would be preaching to a full congregation this morning, looking at the weather yesterday. I was quite convinced I would be preaching to half the church, maybe just this section here. But it's so wonderful to see so many people come this morning. It shows that we are committed to the cause that we have chosen. And this is really to be commended. So thank you so much for turning up this morning. And I hope you'll be refreshed and blessed by what we're going to be talking about. Now, the sermon this morning, as I said, is going to be short. It's based on Matthew chapter 7, reading from verse 21 to 23. Matthew chapter 7, reading from verse 21 to 23. We're going to focus mainly on verse 21 today. But we're going to read all of it anyway, just to give us the context. It reads, "Not everyone who say to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness." This section here is part, of course, of the great Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gave. It's actually coming towards the very end of that Sermon in the Mount. It follows also another statement that Jesus made, which is found in verse 13 of the same chapter, which reads, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way that leads to life, and there are few who go by it, who find it." So what is the conclusion of these two statements? Because the second one is actually a judgment scene that Jesus presents. He said there will be many people on Judgment Day who will say, we're going to claim that they've done this and done that, whatever they've done. And I will tell them, no, I never knew you. And earlier he said, enter by the narrow gate, not the wide one. So what Jesus is saying in these two statements is that majority of the people who have passed the age of accountability are going to be lost. So when you look into the world, most people you come into contact with, chances are they're going to be lost. Because that's what Jesus said. Because there are many people who are going to go by the broad way, which encompasses just about everybody except those who are saved, and they are few in number. So another conclusion you can make is that only a few people are going to be saved. So Jesus in Matthew 7, verse 13 and following, he's saying, your duty is to try and enter by the narrow gate. Don't go with the masses because a lot of people are going to be lost. Your duty is to try and be on the narrow path. You know, one of the things that I often do is whenever there is something that's very popular in the world or that's gone viral, whether everybody's talking about it, my natural instinct is to assume that that thing cannot be right with God until I can prove otherwise. So I don't jump into thinking, well, it's popular, I just jump and go with it because everybody's talking about it. My natural instinct is to think, I need to look into this because chances are this may not be right. In fact, when you look into the world, as I was saying, most people are going to be lost, only a few are going to be saved. Now, when you look at people who profess Christianity, it's funny that majority of those people who profess Christianity are going to be lost, and only a few are going to be saved. So when you look into the world first, everybody included, majority of those people are going to be lost. You can discount them. But when you look at Christianity, all those people who profess Christianity as their religion, most of them are going to be lost. There are, by some accounts, 45,000 different denominations in the world. Just think about that. How many people belong to these denominations who are thinking in their mind they are on their way to heaven? But you and I know they've missed the mark completely, because they are belonging to the part of what they call Christianity, which is not really the true Christianity. Because if you think about what Jesus is saying in Matthew 7, verse 21, he's saying, not everyone who say to me, Lord, Lord, shall make it into heaven. That means majority of the people who claim to be Christians are going to be lost. So many of these people, as I said, they believe they are on their way to heaven. But will only find out come judgment day that they are lost to a devil's hell. Now, let's reduce this further. So we have moved from the world, and we know that in the world many people are going to be lost. And then we come to those who profess Christianity, and we know that majority are going to be lost. Now let's look at the Lord's church. Now we know that not everybody in the Lord's church is going to be saved. Now the numbers each time when we look into this is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So now when we look into the church, we can see that in the Lord's church, not everyone is going to be saved. In fact, as Jesus says in the parable of the tares, there are tares among the wheat, which you and I will never be able to see. Those people are going to be lost. But none of us will be able to know who these people are until judgment day. As Jesus said, let the tares and the wheat grow together. Don't pull the tares out in case you pull the wheat out. Because the way the tares look at this stage, they look exactly like the wheat. So these people look exactly like the children of God. You know, there's a verse in the Bible that says, some men's sins go before them. So you can tell that this guy, he's lost, he's an atheist, he doesn't care about God. But that verse also said, but other people's sin go after them, which means on the outside, you can't tell whether this person is a sinner or not, because their sins are not very evident. Some people's sins are very evident, they are obvious, you can see them. Everybody can see them. But others, you can't really tell, because their sins are hidden. You and I don't know them. By all accounts, they look like the real thing, but in reality, they are not. So that whittles down the number even further when you think about it. Also, when you look at the parable of the 10 virgins, the 5 foolish ones were once part of the kingdom, but they didn't remain faithful to the end. So even if you start out as a child of God, if you don't remain faithful to the end, you're still going to be lost. That whittles down the number even further. So now you can see that very few people are going to be saved. That's why Jesus said, not everyone who said to me, Lord, Lord, or who have this appearance of a Christian is going to be saved, but only those people who do the will of my Father who's in heaven. So when we look back in that verse, that says not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, will be saved, but only those who do the will of my Father is in heaven. Jesus is in effect saying, mere professing Christianity or mere professing Jesus as your Lord is not good enough. Jesus is looking for actions. He's looking for works, not words alone. You know what they say? Talk is cheap. Look, Jesus is looking at deeds, not mere words. Now, when we look at James chapter 2, verse number 26, what does James say? James says, for as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. So your faith alone is not going to be good enough for you to make it to heaven. You need to have some works linked into that faith in order to make it to heaven. In fact, when you read the preceding verses in that James chapter 2, if you read from verse 14, This is what James says. This is where there is a difference between your words, what you say, and what you do. He said, what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or a sister is naked or destitute of daily food, and one of you say to them, depart in peace, be warmed and be filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you not know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? That's the whole point. You see, mere professing, if I say, I believe in God, I have to show what I believe by works. I have to do what God is saying I should do. God is not interested in lip service. He demands actions. Words alone will not going to cut it. Jesus himself says in Matthew 15, verse number 8, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Quoting from Isaiah. You see, the Jews had this idea that they were just going to say things and, pretend. As long as you say what you tend to do, even if you don't do it, it's all good enough. Jesus said that's not going to be good enough. We have to back our words with actions. This morning, Brother Chisholm, we've been talking about let your yes be yes and your no be no. And we said, when I said I'm going to do something, I have to show that I'm committed to do that, so that my word carries some meaning. Because if I say, I am a child of God, I am a Christian, or when I become a child of God, I say, I believe in God, that words alone is not good enough. I have to show it by doing the things that God says I should do. I must obey his commands, including the difficult ones. I must do the things that he said I must do, like worshiping him, attending church services, studying my Bible. These things, when I say I'm a Christian, I have signed up to do. These are the works that will determine that I am really a Christian. Because if I just said I am a Christian and do not do any of these things, then it's meaningless. Come Judgment Day, Jesus will say, I never knew you, or I don't know you. Some people will come up and say, well, I love Jesus, I love God. Well, I love him, I love him. Jesus is saying that if you love me, you have to keep my commandments. You have to do what I say. Words alone are not enough. If you love me, Jesus said, keep my commandments. John 14, verse number 15. One of the greatest condemnation by Jesus in the scriptures was reserved for the scribes and the Pharisees. In fact, there's a whole chapter, I think in Matthew 23, where he goes on to say a lot of things about, he condemned them for so many different things. But one of the reasons he condemned them so strongly is that in Matthew 23, verse number 1, Jesus said this, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to do, that observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. No wonder Jesus called them hypocrites over and over again, because they will tell people to do something which they themselves are not even prepared to do. He will say they will bind heavy burdens on men. They themselves are not even prepared to lift a finger. So when it comes to doing things, one has to do the will of God. You see, in that verse, Jesus said, not everybody who said, Lord, Lord, to me will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. So when it comes to doing, you and I have the obligation to do the will of God, not some other man's will. Not the will of some denomination out there, not even your own will. You have to do the will of God. In Matthew chapter 21, Jesus told the parable of two sons, or what we call the parable of two sons. He said, what do you think? A man had two sons. He went to the first and said, son, go and work today in my vineyard. He answered and said, I will not, but afterwards he regretted it and went. Then he came to the second son and said likewise. And he answered and said, I go, sir, but did not go. Now Jesus asked this question. He said, which of the two sons did the father's will? Now anybody looking at this parable will conclude that the son who said, I will not do this, but went, is the one who did the father's will. Not the one who professed to go, but the one who said, no, I won't go, but actually did the work. That's the son who did the father's will. You see, it is not the one who said he will do, but did not do it, but the one who said, I will not do, but do it in the end. So it is works that counts, not words. Words alone are not enough. Jesus said this in Luke 6, verse number 46. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things which I say? So you see, Jesus wants actions, not mere words. And this is what we are tasked with as children of God. My faith is made evident by what I do. Not by what I say only, but by what I do. It's what I do that's more important. In Hebrews chapter 5, verse number 9, the Bible says this about Jesus. And having been made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Not to all who profess him, Lord, Lord, but to all those who obey him. So obedience is very, very important. Not just mere words. Last week when Brother Trevor was teaching, he touched on this verse, Ephesians chapter 2, verse number 10, which says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. You see, if we do the will of God as the Bible demands that we do, when the roll is called up yonder, all of us are going to be there. We're all going to be there. But if we don't, when the roll is called up yonder, we will find ourselves lost in the devil's house for all eternity. May God bless all of us as we endeavor to do what God says we should do. Not just words, but to do the will of God in this journey that we have chosen, so that when the roll is called up yonder, as I've said, we're all going to be there. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.